In 2020, during the presidential campaign, U.S. President Joe Biden said he wanted to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. But today, yes, that is Biden fist-bumping with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The same Crown Prince, the CIA says, ordered the brutal 2018 assassination of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Jamal Khashoggi, will you apologize to his family, sir?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
President Biden, is Saudi Arabia still a pariah? President Biden.
Biden says he raised Khashoggi's murder directly with the Crown Prince, making his views, quote, crystal clear. Dennis Horak served as Canada's ambassador to Saudi Arabia from 2015 to 2018. Brett Bruen previously served as Director of Global Engagement in the Obama White House. He's now president at the Global Situation Room. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Mr. Bruen, let's start with you. You tweeted that Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia and that fist bump we just showed amounts to, quote, a damaging day for America's moral leadership. Why'd you say that?
Well, because authoritarian leaders around the world are going to point to today's meeting and say all of your pressure, all of your criticism of our human rights record is hypocritical, because look what you did with Mohammed bin Salman after he so brutally murdered a prominent dissident journalist. So I think for American diplomacy, things get much more difficult from here, and I'm not sure that it was worth the few barrels of cheap oil that we may get from it.
We just played a smidge of the Q&A Biden did today, where Biden kind of laughed when the fist bump was raised. He says he raised Khashoggi's murder off the top of the meeting with MBS, and the Crown Prince said to Biden he wasn't responsible, to which Biden said he believed he was. So, again, Brett Bruen, how important is that, if at all? Does the Crown Prince score a win here?
Well, I'm a recovering diplomat, and I know my co-panelist as well can speak to this. You can't simply raise an issue. You have to make clear that there is an expectation that the Saudis are going to change their behavior, that the Crown Prince himself is going to change his behavior. That has to be accompanied by that ask and that expectation. If it's not, it's really just a perfunctory point, and I think that's what we saw play out today in Jeddah.
Dennis Horak, I know you have a different view of Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia, that it's one of necessity. Why do you say it that way?
Well, I mean, certainly, I think I certainly appreciate the moral challenges that Biden was facing in dealing with Saudi Arabia. It was a horrific act. But at the same time, I'm not sure how sustainable isolating Saudi Arabia or somehow punishing them was going to be. Frankly, Saudi Arabia is too important a player, both in the region and globally, and certainly in the energy markets, to have sustained isolation for very long. You have a situation, for example, you have the war in Yemen, you have stability generally in the region, you have the Iran nuclear program. Well, Saudi are players on all of those issues. And there's even a moral dimension, frankly, to engaging Saudi Arabia on these issues. If somehow the reestablishing a working relationship with the Saudi government, if that can somehow lead, for example, to a sustainable peace in Yemen, well, that's the moral option, that's the moral choice, and that's the moral outcome. So the issues, I don't think, are as black and white as, morals versus interests. They're intertwined, and I think both countries have an interest in putting their relationship back on a sounder footing.
Brett Bruen, what do you make of that argument?
Yeah, and I certainly can appreciate the need to weigh broader interests, but I'm zooming this conversation out and looking at the broader picture. And I think, unfortunately, if you take into account not just those things that we immediately need the Saudis for, but what we're trying to accomplish in the region, what we're trying to accomplish globally, it gets more difficult when we have this U-turn. When Biden comes into office and says, I'm putting human rights at the center of my foreign policy, and then when we see what happens in Afghanistan, we see what has happened today in Saudi Arabia, and it erodes the credibility, it erodes the influence that both his administration and I fear future American American administrations will face, which means we'll see more human rights violations. We'll see more abuses of power from leaders like the Crown Prince.
As everyone on the planet knows, Saudi Arabia is a key global player in the oil market, and it's quite clear Russia and China are becoming increasingly adversarial. Is it really possible for the U.S. and, by extension, Western democracies to counter Russia and China without Saudi Arabia? Dennis Horak, I'll give that to you first.
I mean, it is. I mean, Saudi Arabia is obviously a key player in the oil markets, and it's important, I think, to engage them on that. But some of the challenges we're facing with Russia and with China, I think, are very much separate from that. So I think you can still confront or challenge the influence of Russia and China without Saudi Arabia. But I think there's an advantage of having Saudi Arabia to the degree that it's possible in our camp, or at least our camp adjacent, if you will. And part of that, I think, is engaging them, and some of the reforms that they've been implementing, the social and economic reforms in Saudi Arabia, are leading to directions that we have long pushed them to go. And I think encouraging those through engagement is the way forward to try and, as I said, keep them at least camp adjacent to us. So.
And Brett Bruen.
Yeah, I've got to disagree, because I don't think, whether it's on the human rights front at home or, quite frankly, against Vladimir Putin, we have seen much progress. We've seen much cooperation from Riyadh, quite the opposite. And I think the Saudis are playing us this time. And it's unfortunate because, you know, as we were talking about before, some of those trade-offs, if we're going to make this kind of massive trade-off, we ought to be getting in return some massive benefits. And I'm just not seeing them in the statements, in the declarations that have come out from the visit so far. I think this, unfortunately, was a very bad choice by the Biden administration, and one that's going to haunt us for some years to come.
And we all know how images work, right? And I think there's little doubt that the image that will be left in the minds of so many at the end of this visit is the fist bump, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what so many will remember from this. Dennis Horak, at the end of the day, what is the message, though, that sends to the world?
It was inevitable. There was going to be a handshake or a fist bump or something like that, and certainly it's not a great image. But coming back to something that Brett was saying, I mean, I do agree that we, with the Saudis' human rights issues and Khashoggi, are important issues that need to be raised. And the way to deal with them, I think, is through engagement, to talk with them, to engage with them, to try and move them along more positively. And I think it's too early, I think, after the one-day meeting to judge the success of how their approach is going to change or not change if the relationship can get back on an even keel. Yes, the Saudis may play both sides. That's entirely possible. But I think the more the relationship gets back on a sounder footing, perhaps not as deep as it once was, but certainly on a more sounder footing, I think we may be able to see over time a bit more of a reorientation back towards the West. At least that should be the hope. And I think the best way to do that is through engagement. If there's a fist bump that's involved with that, I think that's a small trade-off to make.
Brett Bruen, I'll give the last word to you from your time in the Obama White House when, of course, Biden was vice president.
Yeah, I think it's important for the audience to understand these things are very carefully orchestrated. So that fist bump would have been decided well ahead of time, and I think it was a poor choice. They could have walked into the room, acknowledged one another, not had the handshake, not had the fist bump. I think that would have, just from an image standpoint, sent a message that we're not going to just brush things under the carpet, and unfortunately that appears to be what has happened.
All right, Dennis Horak and Brett Bruen, I appreciate your thoughts. Thanks for your time.
You bet.
Baseball.